we've got a really interesting conversation ahead, and by the looks of it, things, I'm quite seriously outnumbered by introverts at the moment. So this is most yay. So this is most definitely your space. So this is an informal chat. Please just raise your hand if you've got any questions, and put any questions in the chat should you wish to. We'd really just like to have your input as much as possible. So tonight we're exploring introversion, not as a label, I believe, but as a genuine strength. And I think most of us here who are informed about Jungian type and Myers-Briggs type, we know a lot about introversion, but I feel that sometimes out in the world, it feels like it's something to overcome rather than something to sort of build on, and something that's established as such a good thing. And obviously, I'd like to introduce Richard as our speaker, our guest for today. He's founder of the Introvert Space. He's got a huge amount of credibility here because he's got over 20 years experience in government, corporate and media, including being the videographer for 10 Downing Street for the UK Prime Minister, who was Theresa May at the time. So we might go down that little rabbit hole at some point, Richard, because some people might have some questions around that. But also the author of the Introvert Survival Guide, because I'm sure at times it must feel like a little bit of surviving this extroverted world that you seem to have fallen into. The other thing that I really love about your work, Richard, is it's not just for introverts. I think it's also just helping us as extroverts try and collaborate and work with those who have different preferences. And I've often said in the workshops that I run that we all need to be fluent in introversion and extroversion. It's kind of like having two different languages that you've got to speak, in different ways that you've got to communicate. So a warm welcome to you, Richard, and thank you for giving us your time. But I wondered if first you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you to focus on your work in introversion.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Sue. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. A bit about myself. I think I was always the quiet one in the room. So whether that was at home, I was the one that would hide behind the curtains, the long curtains by the windows, reading the book, wrapping myself around that. I was quiet in school. You know, teachers at parents' evening would ask my father, like, is everything okay? You know, even though my predicted grades were pretty well, it's like, but he doesn't put his hand up in class, you know, seems to sit by himself in a playtime. And it was only until I started working full time in what we would call a professional environment that I was made to think that something was wrong with me. And people would literally ask me that, right? Is everything okay or is something wrong? And I spent most of my career in environments where pace mattered, you know, getting out ideas fast, whether that was, as you touched on earlier, you know, central government. I've worked in media, you know, leadership settings. And over time, I just noticed that some people are easy to hear, but then others are easy to miss. And I would always fit into that second category, even though I was doing, in my opinion, excellent work. You know, I was doing what was asked of me, and sometimes beyond, as many of us, I'm sure, can relate to. And it was that mismatch that got my attention, because I realized what workplaces say that they value, and then what they actually rewarded were often, you know, two very different things. So that the work that I do now is really just about helping people make what they achieve visible in a way that still feels like them. Yeah.
Mm. Lovely. And I'm sure that there's a lot of sort of quiet nods going on there. I'm sure you all have quite similar experience, but I'm just sort of wondering when you first had that realization that understanding about introversion should be shared, and how that sort of changed your sort of professional direction in a way. Was there a dawning, or was it just Was it a sudden thing, or did it come sort of quite quietly?
I like that quietly. It was quite late actually, and I say late because what I'm early 40s, so yeah, early 30s. It was after reading Susan Cain's book and watching her TED talk.
Mm,
Yeah, this is probably a very familiar story that we
yeah.
hear many introverts say. Because prior to that enlightenment, for a long time, I just simply assumed that what I was going through was just normal. You know,
Mm,
everyone, a lot of people just experience the same thing and simply
mm,
just handled it better. But
yeah.
then all of a sudden, I had a language for it. There was a label, or at least, and why certain settings felt energizing for some and then not and not for others. And
Mm,
why I would be very present one-on-one or small group situations, and
yeah.
then time to process in larger group dynamics, or especially networking.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, that awareness made my efforts definitely more assured, I would say. So I started
Hmm.
looking for workplace training specific for introverts, which actually wasn't easy to find, but
I bet.
we'll be able
Yeah,
to.
I'm sure. Yeah, I've raised my lovely daughter who's has a clear preference for introversion, and that Susan Cain TED talk was something that I showed her when she was in her mid-teens, and it made an enormous difference to her. And then she went on to read the book, which also she found just so enlightening and helpful. And I think her experience, much as you said earlier on, Richard, is that she very frequently felt overlooked and underestimated, which
Yeah,
I think is something that you're saying as well. And also in going for job interviews, she had some feedback once that the interviewer, that the company said that they didn't think she looked like she wanted the job, um, which is
similar.
extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kate, it's looking like you've had a similar experience to that. um, so, I think that there's a reason why this sort of diversity resonates. But you've worked in some very high visibility roles, including, as we've mentioned, videographer for the UK Prime Minister. So, how did you navigate those environments as an introvert?
I would definitely say the appropriate answer is carefully,
Yeah.
because those environments are intense. As
Hmm.
I mean, I don't need to explain that to anyone. Every single day, I feel like when I go on to the Guardian app or something, the front page changes. I think yesterday with Mandelson, wasn't it? It's going to keep changing.
Hmm.
Um, because it's high stakes, it's fast paced. And when I was working, yeah, when I was there, it was about Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. Get the deal done, get the deal done. So there was a lot of scrutiny on the PM at the time, especially as Theresa May voted to remain before she became PM. And so for
Hmm.
me, the temptation was, and for anyone in the role I had, was to assume that you need to become bigger and louder in order to fit in with everyone else performing a similar personality. It's just performance, right? So
Mm.
I think thankfully my role was to be invisible,
Hmm.
literally. So
Perfect.
yeah,
Perfect.
my role was to be very clear with instruction and creative direction. Please stand here, Prime Minister. Look here, do this. So yeah, my job was to be useful, essentially, and all of
Mhm.
the things that I imagine an introverted prime minister appreciated. And I only say that she's introvert has an introverted preference because I was very fortunate to meet up with her for a private meeting in now Baroness May, as she's in the House of Lords. We met for a quick coffee in our office, and we had an opportunity to exchange our appreciation, of each other's work, and that was really nice. So yeah, there's definitely something useful about high pressure environments if you have an introverted preference, because they force you to just be precise, and we're good at that.
Mhm.
We're good to see what
Mhm.
matters and what doesn't, and just kind of trim the fat. And that definitely suited me rather than trying to project constant energy. like I
Hmm.
had done in previous roles.
Did you feel like you were an introvert in a very extroverted space in that context? Would the majority of the politicians who you came across, do you think, have a preference for extroversion, or were they kind of masking what might have been a natural preference underneath?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult to tell, and perhaps they
Hmm.
were masking. In fact, I really didn't like the energy. Let's talk about energy. But the energy was so intense in the house that I actually moved my office to the cabinet office, which is behind number 10. So if you were to go down Whitehall, the cabinet office backs onto to down the street, and there's
Hmm.
this revolving door which connects the two. So I actually moved my office. I mean, which some people thought, oh my God, that's crazy. You had a top, you're in the down the street. But um, yeah, I did that for two reasons. Yeah, the energy, but also I wanted that feeling of walking through that black door to feel quite special. And if you're doing it every single day, it, yeah, I don't know. For me, it can kind of did it
Mm.
wear off? I don't know. I was worried it would wear off. I never got to experience that. But for me, yeah, I actually moved location because the energy was too much.
Mm. Does anybody have any questions for Richard? It's such an interesting experience, or to meet somebody that's had that experience. Does anyone have any questions you want to ask?
I mean, one of the really, I would say, cool things about the job was that, you'd have two passports. So they'd have a second passport for you, which they kept. And, I'd have a little carry-on suitcase that was always packed, ready to go in case, my phone went off at like 3 a.m. and they'd send
Mm.
a car to my house. And then before we know it, we're at, what was that airport? Uh, it was an RAF airport, Northolt,
Hmm.
which is where her jet is, and would go to wherever we need to go to. And because of Brexit, it was generally Strasbourg, Brussels, The Hague. So no, I didn't get to do any sort of James Bond glamorous, what Farmer's doing at the moment. He's going everywhere. Apparently, he's the most traveled PM after Sunak. So
Mm.
yeah, those moments were were engaging, were definitely an opportunity to see what mattered outside of the noise because there's only about 12 or so of you on this plane and you get to hear the discussions.
Mm.
So yeah, that that was worth it for sure.
Hmm. Great. Jerry, did you have unmute to have a question?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's it was question or observation or whatever. Just going back a little bit to the question of it, extroversion, introversion, and um, one of the things that I really like and appreciate about the type model is the way in which the qualities are always in tension with each other. And that therefore extroversion or introversion is not a lack of extroversion. It's a quality that's held in tension with it. And I think in the kind of five factor model, extroversion is seen as kind of normal humanity, and introversion is
Mm.
seen as a lack. So there's a sense that you're actually kind of measuring how much of a good thing somebody has in terms of extroversion, whereas I think type is much more um, accepting of the range of human experience as a model for that reason.
Mm.
There's a wider
Yeah.
range of normal, if you like.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you, Jerry. I think that when you put extroversion on a pedestal, despite the fact that it is my preference, it's seriously not helpful
Mm.
to 50% of the population for sure. I I was just wondering, Richard, if you had time in that work that you did um, as to just regain your energy. Could you find your quiet moments that you needed, or was it just go go go? For those of you who've just joined us,
Mm.
Richard was videographer for Number 10 Downing Street, so we're just talking to him about that.
So the good thing about being precise with filmmaking is once you have your content, you can leave. So,
Yeah.
for example, if it was the UN General Assembly over in New York, all these world leaders gather together. They have their bilaterals meetings in these rooms, and there's press everywhere taking pictures and so forth. I go in, I know exactly what images I wish to capture. I capture them, I go somewhere else, and I just relax for a moment and wait for the PM to finish her meeting because they usually take around 20 to 30 minutes and then she moves on. I'd actually feel sorry for her, in terms of, gosh, when do you get to recharge? But
Mm.
so yeah, those were the moments where I did make sure I found myself a quiet area. And the good thing about being someone holding a camera in that space is you just fit into the the plethora of media just around. So I kind of just
Mm.
hide. It's not like a Where's Wally situation. I can blend in and disappear again. So yeah,
Mm.
that's how I did that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can disappear in a crowded space.
Indeed, indeed.
Interesting. Yeah. Catherine.
Oops, sorry, took a while to unmute myself then. Yeah, so I'm quite well, I'm interested in lots of stuff to do with this, obviously. But you said, Richard, that one of the things you help people with is how to make what they achieve visible. So I'm interested in what sort of advice you give people, and I'll just add that I remember, all through my career, my boss, when I was having the annual performance appraisal, this was before I became self-employed, they'd say, you need to network more, you need to network more. Um, and that's hard. I like to do the work because I'm interested in it. I like to do the deep thinking and the stuff. Networking, it wasn't that easy for me. Probably better now. Anyway, I guess my question really is, what sort of advice do you give people on how to make what they achieve visible and do that in an authentic way, because we don't like to shout about what we're doing or so on.
No, 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 we don't. And the coincidence is this morning I actually ran an authentic visibility workshop for a client of mine, and that about communicating impact without stepping outside your own comfort and personality type. And what I had or what I have is a visibility plan, which is aligned with their strengths and energy. And I'll be very, very happy to share that with you all after this session. There are also terms and words like I use to expand on upon what we would normally say, for example, in one-to-one conversations with our line manager, especially as mid-year appraisals are currently happening or about to happen. And I did a role play with one of the individuals this morning as well. So again, I can definitely share some notes from that. But not even but yeah, it's having wording that fits in with those who you are trying to communicate to. So, for example, I used to ask to join meetings that my line manager would join and just be silent, shadow, whatever you want to call these things. Because once I understood the language of the C-suite, once I understood what my seniors, like, my 2 rows up, would actually desire, then it was a lot easier for me to focus my attention on what I know that my own line manager would appreciate from me, and to frame it in the wording that is common for my manager to also speak with her seniors at the time. So yeah, it's twofold there. It's being present in the spaces where the language is being spoken, and then having that visibility plan that is applicable not just within your team but outside of it. So again, joining other projects external to your teams that other people can see the value that you bring and then communicate that back to you. I mean, that's one of the most beautiful things for sure.
Mm.
Can I butt in
I love.
can I butt in with another question?
Please do.
which is about being present in a meeting, and taking a position of the questioner rather than the person that is supposed to be chipping in with ideas or answers. And with my own preference for introversion, one of the reasons I think that I've ended up in coaching is that I like to be the person asking the question. I don't feel I need to hold the floor. In fact, I don't really like holding the floor. Um, but asking a question, I think, is it's a way of being visible without feeling that you are kind of going out at the end of the pier, as it sometimes feels that you have to with if you're pushing out a lot of extroversion.
I like that because it shows that you're engaged,
Yeah.
and it also shows an alternative view of a particular topic so that we can either dive deeper or move quicker to a solution. It's that classic two people looking down at the same number and someone saying, wait, that's a 6. No, that's a 9. Then this is important for alternative perspectives to be seen and heard, for sure. I like that.
I love that idea, Richard, of having a visibility plan, to literally plan for it. That strikes me as something that would be incredibly useful to a lot of people. It also kind of comically strikes me that you need a plan for the extroverts to have take a back seat plan. For goodness sakes, shut up for a moment. So do you when you're doing your presentations, do you cover both sides?
I certainly ask if there are people managers in the room, and if there are, then there are elements of my workshops where I do ask them or pose particular questions that show both sides of again that this kind of perception angle. For example, how many channels do you provide your team to communicate with you? Either pre, during, or post meetings, or just generally. And are you someone who regularly shares an agenda before a meeting? That's quite important. I had a friend who used to say, "No agenda, no attender," because agendas help. Well, they should help everyone, but definitely, I know introverts in particular like to be able to reflect on, think deeply before entering into a meeting and to make valid points.
I was talking to my colleague Jane Kesey recently, and she was saying one of the exercises that she does for extroversion and introversion is literally have the room be quiet, and for people to turn over a card when that quietness became awkward. And the extroverts were not long into the quiet space before they turned over their card, because it is, my goodness, nobody's saying anything. I better just chirp up with something. Although I have to say, extroverts live with a lot of regrets. Just saying, there are times when we shouldn't chirp up with the things that we should be chirping up with. But just tell us a bit more about the introvert space. What was there a particular gap you were trying to fill when you founded it? I think you've sort of answered quite a bit of that, but was there something in particular that dawned on you that was important?
Yeah, I would definitely say lack of training for introverts in the workplace. After reading Susan King's Quiet, I did go for it on a search. I just couldn't find it. So I reached out to the Guardian newspaper, who at the time used to have masterclasses. And the lady who ran it, and I said, look, do you have any workshops for introverts or personality type, etc.? And she's like, no. But she said, hey, if you want to go off and put one together, we could try it. So yeah, about 6 months later, after doing a lot of research and the rest of it, came back, and yeah, it was very quickly sold out. And I think 8+ years later, it continued to grow. And so it definitely just showed that there's a need for it. So once they stopped those workshops, I had people messaging me saying, hey, Rich, can we keep talking? How, are there any more ways interact. And that's how
Mm.
that space was born.
And very wise of you to be so specific. I think that was a clever marketing tool, even if it did come about somewhat naturally. Marion, you have a question.
Yes, two comments. The first one is about what you said, Richard, before, that you are creating workshops for extroverts as well as for introverts, because extroverts need to learn the things that they need to do to allow introverts to engage more. And yes, if there is an agenda, don't show it at the beginning of the meeting, because that's already 48 hours too late for introverts, or at least a day too late. Because if extroverts want introverts to bring their best thinking, they need reflection time ahead of time, so that they can come in prepared. And of course, for that, there need to be questions like, what is it we are solving for in this next meeting? So I'm really taking in that you are actually creating training, creating workshops for extroverts to be better managers and leaders to introverts. So that's one thing. The other thing that you just said is actually related a little bit to it. Is that there is no training for introverts. Well, I agree, and I would disagree, because all of the communication skills trainings are assigned to introverts. So supposedly there are workshops for introverts. It's not articulated, but when introverts keep getting this broken record, you need to speak up, you need to be visible, communication skills, make your voice heard, blah 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 blah, and they just shuffle them into communication skills workshops, while the problem is not really is not as simple. The problem is two-sided. Extroverts don't shut up, and they need to actually learn how to do that, and be differential, and get comfortable with the silence. And introverts, yes, they need to up their game, and they need to learn communication techniques that would come off as almost like playing like an extrovert. So it's extroverting, learning the skills of extroverts to speak up, to bring up the energy, to communicate. And so I just wanted to make these two comments, and then reflecting back to Jerry's point about asking questions. I have figured out for myself that, especially as an INTJ, that my ideas could be 5 blocks ahead of everybody, like 4 or 5 thoughts ahead of everybody. And of course, if I say my idea, nobody's going to understand, because as a woman INTJ, I am maybe 1% of the population. So 99% of the people, other than the other NTs, probably will not get what I'm saying. Not because I am a brilliant person. It's just that my brain functions differently, and because as an intuitive type, it's not easy to explain how ideas pop up, because it's not a linear process of thinking through, right? It just in a millisecond, things just click, and here it comes. And then reflecting back again to Jerry, is I realized that asking questions that help the crowd go in the direction of my idea is a better strategy than communicating my idea prematurely before anybody is understanding what it is that I mean, and then kick myself 15-20 minutes later when everybody else comes up with my idea that I had already shared. And so I am sitting here in New York City, and I can tell you, as an LNOD practitioner expert, that all of the workshops, people, L&D folks send all of the introverts into communication skills workshops, and it's not working. So I just wanted to make these comments. There is not really a question. There's not a question here. Just
Thank
stuff.
you, Mary. I think, I'll just briefly say that, yes, I do courses for extroverts because the environments need to change, not the introverts themselves. It takes too long for us to do anything by ourselves. And then secondly, the reason why those workshops, communication workshops, are available but don't seem to work is because they're designed by the people at the top who are mainly extroverts. So it's just there's your problem there.
Yeah, total oxymoron. Yeah.
Catherine.
I'm just going to say, I agree very much with what Marion has been saying. And yes, communication skills training, we as introverts are taught how to communicate and all that, and how to make presentations and all that stuff. But part of I think there's two things. Introverts, I think one of the things we need to learn is how to speak up, how to interrupt almost without feeling rude, because we assume that you take it in turns to speak, but extroverts are comfortable talking over each other. And so we have to find ways to make ourselves interrupt other people without feeling awful about interrupting them. So that's a thing for introverts. And I think extroverts need to ask the questions, because if you want to know what an introvert is thinking, you've got to ask them. But the extroverts just assume the introverts haven't got anything to say. And extroverts don't necessarily think they need communication skills training because they already, communicate lots anyway. So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm basically just, I think, agreeing with what Marion's been saying.
That was excellent, Catherine. Thank you. Both you and Marion. Thank you.
A question that comes to my mind as somebody who is extroverted or typically extroverted, is what's the bigger problem for you? Like a situation that's a meeting, which in my experience in meetings, the extroverts who are, behaving well sort of tend to tone down, and the introverts tend to go, well, it's a meeting, so they sort of level up a little. Or is it outside of the meeting situation? Because we sort of talk a lot about meetings, but there's a whole lot of stuff outside of that. Is there a space that's a greater problem for people with a preference for introversion, or is that not a question? Marion.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because introverts communicate outside of the formal channels of communication. So and extroverts communicate blanketing, wherever, however, and I think the issue is that if we want introverts to be visible and their ideas to be considered and being in the mix, then we need to actually have that happen in a meeting where they can actually have the floor, where there are the people who need to hear what they have to hear is there, and not sending an email with the stuff where there is no face to it. And so I think it's helping introverts to prepare, as Richard, you were saying, to prepare for how to speak up, how to interrupt, how to get into the conversation. Because I'm also noticing, and this is actually my hypothesis, but life hasn't proven me wrong as of yet, that the ideas that are being discussed in any meeting, anywhere, are pretty much the ideas of extroverts. Because introverts are sitting on their ideas because they are not able to find a segue in to interrupt and put their ideas in. And as I shared, for NT types, it's challenging to even say the idea, because people look at you like you have 5 heads, because they are 5 steps behind in their thinking, and so helping introverts maximize the opportunity that they have when they have a captive audience. Because if the conversation is taken outside of that, then it goes back into to behind the curtains. It's like nobody knows who said what, and that introverts never get credit for their ideas.
Marion, a really good I like that. And there are two things I often share. Number one, this one's a bit tougher, but with practice it works. Practice name calling. And what I mean by that comes from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that line about no sweeter a sound than the sound of a person's name, right, to that individual. So if someone's going on and on and on and on and on and on, and then you literally just say their name, thank you, name, to add to that point. For some reason, psychologically, it could be some sort of thing from way back when, it just seems to buy you that gap in. That's one. But as I said, that takes a bit of practice. So maybe practice it with your own team first. The second one, which I find really effective, is speaking with said chair, especially if they've shared an agenda. And Sue, I'm talking about meetings only because meetings seem to take up about 70% of our working week. If you can speak to a chair before a meeting and say, I would like to raise a point on this. There is something so wonderful, so beautiful about being introduced to share a point in a meeting. It's like rolling the red carpet. Everyone's like, oh, whoa. What does Greer want to say? And then all of a sudden, Greer has the floor and everyone's listening, full attention. No one's going to interrupt this individual because they've been invited to give a point. Those are two things that have worked for me. And yeah, I often share.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Wow.
Any other?
One thing that I've found works well when I'm facilitating is a very simple technique that many people I'm sure already use, which is when there's a group discussion needed, to always start by having 2 minutes to write down your ideas or your responses, because that does two things. One, it quietens the extroverts and prevents them from jumping in when. And it's not like extroverts are bad people in some way. They're just going with their own energy. So, but the 2 minute silence stops that happening, and it also makes sure that introverts, they might well rather have had 48 hours to think about it, but they've had 2 minutes. They've written something down, and once there's something there for them to contribute, and they're on a level playing field, or we're on a level playing field, we're usually quite happy to say, well, this is what I wrote down. This thing that I've extroverted already down here on this piece of paper. And that, generally speaking, at least starts a conversation in a meeting on, I find, a more level playing field.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jerry, I would add to it that after that 2 minute silence and jotting down the ideas, round robin is a must. And who wants to share first? An extrovert is going to share first, and then point in either direction. How are we going to go round robin? Because then after the 2 minute silence, extroverts are going to jump in, and introverts will be the last ones, and that, like, deer in the headlights moment is it really freezes the brain over. And when it's predictable when I'm going to speak, when I'm going to be next, then I can psychologically not only pay attention to what everybody else was saying, but when it's my turn, I can actually step into my power and share what I really wanted to share, as opposed to if it's just like random, it's like, I personally, I don't even remember what everybody said because I'm waiting for my turn and all of that. So for that reason, I actually try to speak first and then let the pressure fall away. Yeah.
I was just wondering, Richard, what you think the common misconceptions are that you've come across in the work that you're doing. What is the misunderstood?
I think we've heard it already about being quiet means lack of engagement, lack of interest. That's definitely the one I've heard the most. I've been told, what have I been told? You're a bit laid back. Someone just hasn't spoken yet or spoken less, and the assumption is they're unsure, they're disinterested, or just not wanting to contribute. And as again, as we've touched on earlier, we're just processing things different. We're just different, and it's just important to be seen. And I guess that then leads on. Well, before I even move on to the next bit, the issue with that silence is that people who are usually like managers or those in charge, let's say, interpret what that silence means instead of asking said individual, why were you quiet during said interaction? Was there anything that could have helped you to contribute a bit more freely? Those questions are very rare, unfortunately. And that's my mission. That's, I'm sure, missions of other people out here trying to train and coach and mentor people managers and leaders to just think a bit differently. So that leads me on to my next bit about another misconception being that introverts do not want to collaborate or be visible, and hence you should get out there a bit more, make yourself a bit more visible, go network, as Catherine mentioned. And these things aren't true. It's not that we don't want to talk to people. Most introverts I speak with, they care very deeply about impact. They just tend to prefer a less performative route to it. So yeah, I guess for those who, and I don't like to say extroverts all the time because I don't want it to sound like a us versus them, but for those who just don't understand it fully yet, I think the useful shift is just recognizing that participation doesn't always look immediate. Sometimes people are just quiet because they're waiting to come with the point that's really quite sharp. And it might not actually happen within that space. Leave the door open after the meeting's finished. Hey, you know what? If you have any more ideas, please feel free to message me on X, Y, and Z.
One of the things that I've done very frequently is divide the room into two with the E's on one side and the I's on the other. And first of all, the noise that the extroverts make in trying to get to one side of the room is just ridiculous. The introverts just quietly go to the other side of the room and watch the extroverts. Like, what are they talking about? All you asked them to do was move to one side of the room. But then I often ask, what do you admire about your opposite, which I'm sure is something that many other people have done as well. And the thing that comes up most regularly is that the introverts admire the extroverts' confidence, but especially when you're talking with teenagers, which I've done a lot of, you say, turn to this group and say, and do you feel confident? And they go, no way. I might look it, but I'm not as, it's not what it seems. But then for the introverts is that you are admired for being calm. Now, whether you feel calm or not, what's going on underneath, you could be the swan gliding along the top with your feet paddling wildly underneath. But this calm quality is fabulous. I'm sure you promote all of these positives as well, Richard, because in a crisis, there is nothing better than to be with somebody who appears calm. Is that
totally, and those are things. Sorry, elements and qualities that I definitely highlight when I'm doing keynotes, for example, at strategy away days, or companies may hire me to come and give a talk about something that they're not used to hearing, and personality is usually one of those things. And that calm, dependable, trustworthy, these are the kind of qualities that I feel like are even more in demand at the moment where there is division in some areas at the moment, or there is fear that generative AI may take over certain elements of work, and it's just having clarity. I mean, there's an element of clarity that needs to be improved across a lot of sectors at the moment. I've noticed from conversations. And I still have a lot of contacts within central government, and they definitely need some introvert favorite qualities at the moment for sure.
Mm. Jonathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so yesterday my friend and I had a client, and we were going between ENTJ and INTJ, and we settled on an ENTJ who was quite quiet. So I'm wondering if you've ever had workshops where people who thought they were extroverts decided that, oh, I'm an introvert, or vice versa, like extroverts who or introverts who said, oh, maybe I'm an extrovert, or what experience that is.
I like that question, Jonathan. I haven't had it explicitly done that way. I've had people who turned up, and I always ask, I would do like a Slido poll or something and ask people to choose what they think they are. And I've had those who select not sure, then end the session saying, oh, yeah, I'm definitely this or that. But yeah, I've not had it explicitly, someone who knows what they are saying actually that. I'm the opposite.
Kate, thanks, Jonathan. Kate,
I was wondering, just Jonathan being the first feeler, but we've had all the thinkers talking, and I was wondering if you see a difference between introverted feelers and introverted thinkers, because I know for myself, sharing my thinking can be difficult versus sharing what I feel about values or what I'm seeing as things that are not congruent, or that comes sort of naturally, but I feel a bit of like my heart is pounding a million miles a second right now, but like just even speaking up as an introvert but also a feeler can sometimes be even more challenging. So I wonder if you see that at all in your work.
I do, Kate, and thank you for that question. And I notice in just our language, thinkers usually say I think, and feelers usually say I feel, and you did that a couple of times, I noticed. And when I have workshops, the thinkers are the ones who, when I have something on screen and I ask someone, people's opinions, they're the ones that usually raise their hands. But the feelers are the ones who, when there are kind of partner setups, or kind of group sessions, they're the ones where you're hearing the laughter and all sorts. It's like, oh, wow, okay. So there's that level of comfort and ease to the point where I always feel a bit bad interrupting when I know we have to kind of move along. I'm like, okay, we've got 2 minutes left, folks. So yeah, it's at that point I kind of work out in the room where my feelers are, and then yeah, that's just really nice to see the harmony within the space, because I am often asked by my peers, what's it actually like, conducting a workshop full of introverts? Must be really quiet. It's actually, if you walked in, you wouldn't think that at all.
Catherine, I was just thinking about your work with doing interaction styles, and wondering, as you do interaction styles, and obviously there's, for those of you who don't know, that it's a quadrant system where you've got 2 extroverted types and 2 introverted types. Do you find that difference between extroversion and introversion is something that is particularly valuable and strong to the people who are learning about interaction styles?
Oh, yes, definitely. For all the reasons we said, the extroverted styles are the people with those styles are there saying what they think, and so, pushing ahead and moving on. The more introverted people are thinking and so on. But what was just going through my mind actually when Kate was speaking was INTP, my type, and INFP have the same interaction style. So, because the interaction style is more about how you're coming across and what's driving your behavior when you're communicating. And one of the characteristics of INTP or INFP or ISFJ, for example, is sort of being fairly accommodating, listening, being open-minded and so on. And interestingly, Jerry's type, INTJ, and INFJ, Jonathan's type, they also share an interaction style. And that's people with those types and that style have this drive to have a plan, and St. Marion as well, know what's going to happen, have a plan. That's what's driving their behavior, and they like to be sort of organized. Whereas the INFP or INTP are more, as I said, accommodating, flexible, going with the flow sort of thing. So I don't, that's a bit of a rambling answer, but basically I think I could feel some of the interaction style differences coming out just then in the sort of discussion that we were having. And I think interaction styles is a really useful tool because it really is about communication, because it really is about how you come across in meetings or how you relate to somebody, how you adapt to their behavior, how you flex and so on. It's very much those external behaviors, but being driven by things that are happening sort of internally.
Thanks, Catherine. I think it's helpful for the extroverts too to see those difference in something like those quadrants. But Jerry.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit. I mean, I guess one of the things that one also has to bear in mind if you're thinking about if we're thinking about sort of 16 types rather than just pairs of opposites or pairs of complementary qualities, is that we all have a function that we use to extrovert, and we all have a function that we use or we prefer to rely on in our introvert world. So I find it so now the point of the INTJ preference is the point of this is, it's a learning conversation, and where we need to get to is everybody learning. Okay, so that's extroverted thinking. So I'm quite comfortable jumping in with that kind of thing. I find it much harder to share my dominant function, which is my introverted intuition, because it feels a bit weird and I'm not quite certain of what I'm going to say next, and it might not be quite what I thought it was when it gets out there. So there's also that balance that we all have, whether we have a preference for extroversion or introversion, as to the way in which we are mediating ourselves to the world. I hope that kind of makes sense.
I'll just jump in and make a quick comment, because Jerry and I both have NT, but obviously in the opposite worlds. So for me, my auxiliary intuition, which I'd call brainstorming, if you like, I'm happy sharing all that in the external world, but I would find it harder to share my, logical, analytical, introverted thinking.
That's why you write books, though, isn't it?
That's why I write it down, yeah.
Very good books, everybody. If you haven't read them,
yeah, please buy those. Yeah.
Thank you. I said I was no good at networking or marketing myself.
We'll do it for you. We'll do it for you, Catherine. Just that's okay. Tasha, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Just because you mentioned books, I just wondered if there was anything that you have come across in your research for all the work that you've done that you feel is canon for us introverts, apart from Susan Cain.
Yes, there's a book called Smart. Thanks for your question, first of all, Tasha. There's a book called Smart Brevity. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Yes, Smart Brevity: The Power of Saying More with Less. I found that really helpful for writing emails in particular, because I like Jerry, can get into my extroverted thinking, and my emails are essays, and I don't need to do that. So that book was definitely helpful. And there's another one. When it comes to me, I'll again.
Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot, so you.
That's fine. That's totally fine. But I mean, that's one anytime anyone asks me, because it's true to its word, because the book itself is really is short enough as well. So you can read it on a flight, 2 hour flight, and you're done.
Very good.
I think I've got that right, Richard. It's smart brevity.
Correct. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Cool. So I was also thinking, Richard, that you launched into extroversion and introversion as a tool for your professional work, and sort of relatively recently you've come across sort of Myers-Briggs and the extra 3 letters, and I was sort of wondering how that sort of informed what you are doing now, and has it been helpful for you to just understand those extra dimensions, that it's not just E and I. I'm sure you always knew that before, but having this sort of format and this framework to work with.
Yeah, definitely, and basically Jerry's kind of touched on it as well, and Catherine, in terms of understanding where certain functions work best, and so definitely understanding that my dominant function is introverted intuition, and how it means I'm naturally drawn to the underlying structure of things rather than the immediate picture. And attending your type sessions really helped me with that. So thank you, and anyone else who's not attended those, please go to them. So I would definitely say it's that recognition felt less like a revelation and definitely more like a correction of my self-perception. So definitely a more accurate direction of my operating system, if you will, that then allows me to better train, or I don't want to say instruct, but just hold a clearer mirror in front of those that I train, for sure. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And the other thing that comes to mind is have you ever come across somebody who's just too difficult to reach? Like you just think, oh my goodness, they're just simply not going to change. And if you have, is there a common factor in that that awareness?
I think the variation is less about introversion itself and more about the context or the confidence or the language. And so some introverts already have a strong sense of the strength that they have, and they can talk about them comfortably. Others know that they're good at what they do, but haven't had much practice translating that into workplace language. So there's those two elements. You know your stuff, and you can talk about it comfortably. You know your stuff, but you just haven't got that workplace language yet. And then there's the question of if someone feels psychologically safe. Now these are the individuals that are often the hardest to kind of get through to in that respect, because if a person has spent years being misread, they're understandably cautious or doubtful about their own talents and speaking about them. So my first job is often to create enough trust so that the people I'm working with can talk honestly about how they work, how they'd like to be seen as well, because it's, I often say, personal branding is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So if what you think people say about you is not where you want to be, where you want it to be, and this is where you want it to be, my job is to help bridge that gap. And in that place of trust, that conversation can definitely become a lot richer.
I think that idea of psychological safety is incredibly important, especially for introverts. And I think that the worry is with corporations, companies, or any groups is what are they going to do with this information once they have it? And so, are people going to make some, ridiculous assumption that you have a preference for introversion and therefore, you won't be moving up to the C-suite anytime soon? Is that something you've come across? And do you find the people who are in the C-suite, do you find that they are more extroverts than introverts, or is that a myth as well?
Well, soon, soon there'll be data to actually show the numbers.
Yes,
And
tell us about that actually.
yes, because for the first time in the UK, we have large-scale data on how personality types shape workplace experience, especially how introversion and extroversion influences communication, progression, and recognition. So, I mean, I shouldn't really say everything, but I will definitely say that the numbers are there. And as we probably expect, across 35-ish sectors in the UK, 5,000 people interviewed. Extroverts make up only roughly the late 20s in terms of percentage. And yet, in the C-suite, they make up over 70%. So it's there's this dichotomy that is not great, and now the numbers are there. It's about, okay, what can we do to change it? It's hard to, what can we actually do? And to Marion's point about that training, right, as well, you've got middle managers who want to get up to C-suite level, but the training, introverted managers, but the training that they receive is developed by extroverts, and so they wonder why it just doesn't seem to work. And then, or the members of the C-suite who are introverted are struggling, and then sometimes they leave. There's stress. There's something I would call energy tax, where because they're not given the opportunity for the space for for what we as introverts appreciate, some of that alone time to do certain bits of work, we're overworked. Maybe even sometimes the quality of the work isn't what we would like it to be, because of the pace at which it's required, and so forth. I mean, I'm not saying we don't do the work right. It's just that we are expected to wear a mask and operate in an extroverted way all of the time, which then has that energy tax on what on the work that we produce.
Very interesting. I haven't heard that statistic. So obviously, so clearly put, to be quite honest. And for those of you who are interested, there is a link to that survey at the top of the chat box there. So if you do want to take a look at those, the results are in there, are they, Richard? The results of that.
So the report will be released at the end of this month. So that link at the top, if you pop your name and email address, you'll be notified.
Then you'll get the report.
Yeah.
Check your junk. And I think so important that you're not just teaching introverts to be extroverts. That seems wild. Yeah. Marion.
Yeah. Could you please put the link in the chat again? Because I unfortunately came in late. I had a coaching session before, and it doesn't show up for me because I joined. Thank you. And wow, those numbers are shocking and really sad for me, because and it goes back to my hypothesis that 50% of any organization's ideas never make it to the light of day, because introverts are sitting on them, and they, like in baseball, they try once, twice, and three times to get a segue in, and it just not working, and then they just like, okay, I give up and just do whatever you want to do. This is now not my business, because this organization is not interested in what I have to say. And I also sense, I coach a lot of technical professionals, all introverts. 90, well, the people who come to me are mostly introverts and technical professionals, and they say that 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 invisibility is killing them, really, that they are not able to share their ideas, and the other group, and I also don't want to put it like, oh, we against them and all of that, because there is already polarization. But that there has to be a way to collectively create an environment for introverts to step up, while providing the resources, the learning opportunities, the tips and tricks, and the techniques to step out of their own shadows. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
So the onus is partly on us.
Exactly.
I had a question written down here that I'll ask it anyway, but in your experience, what do extroverts most need to do differently in order to truly collaborate with introverted colleagues rather than just accommodate them? It seems like a timely moment to bring this up.
I think it's just don't assume. Don't assume because there's a particular behavior, or don't assume the behaviors you're used to are the best just because they're the most dominant in the workplace. There's a little exercise I do in some of my sessions where I have a sentence written on the screen, and I ask everyone in attendance to write down or say how many times they see the letter F. And in however many years I've been showing that sentence, never, ever, 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 ever has there been an 100% accuracy. And it could be 3 people in the room or 300 people in the room. And my whole thing is, imagine if the people who were constantly getting it wrong were the majority of the C-suite, or the majority of the people who made all of the communications, or ran the culture of the organization. Then the assumption would be that that's the correct way to run things, even though it's not actually correct. So yeah, try not to assume. I think it's about looking at how contribution also I don't know. It's worth looking at how contribution is invited. If the signals in a team are built around spontaneity, brainstorming sessions. I don't like brainstorming sessions. I know, was it Catherine? You mentioned them, but I need a moment. I think for me, speed is not my thing. Or those live events where you need to drop comments, questions. Give me a second. I need a second. So just think about how contribution is being invited. Are there different channels? Written in advanced agendas, follow-up comments. All these things make a real difference, for sure.
Yeah, I love that question. How is contribution invited? I think that's...
sorry, Sue. I was going to say, to Marion's point as well, to be fair, introverts, we have work to do as well. We need to make sure we communicate clearly rather than just hoping the room will infer to our value, because good collaboration goes both ways. It's not us.
Yeah, I think also, in both cases, what you're asking extroverts and introverts to do is to swim upstream. It's difficult for both sides. It's difficult for the extroverts to actually shut up, as you might have noticed this evening. But I'm doing my best. But it's difficult to help people, raise themselves, and just that wonderful thing of being able to accept both sides and what comes from that. You're not just looking at 2 different poles, the extroversion and introversion pole, but you're looking at an incredible sort of transcendent function of what you get that's so unbelievably different when you can actually pull the 2 together. Catherine, and then we'll go to Marion.
Yeah, thanks. Just thinking about the sort of intersection of extroversion, introversion, and gender, which we haven't really touched on. So I've always worked in technical engineering, manufacturing companies, male dominated, and I was just thinking that a lot of the behaviors that make people successful in those environments, being dominant, being assertive, pushing for results, getting things done, are things we tend to associate with extroversion, but they're also things we tend to associate with men. And so those are the behaviors I see, and it's a cultural thing, is what I'm trying to say. They're behaving like that either because they're extroverted anyway, or because they're men and that's what's expected. And I think it's especially hard for men with introversion preferences, particularly introverted and feeling preferences, to get on in that sort of environment and be recognized. And I think that, as a thinking woman, it was easier probably for me to get on in the male environments that I've always worked in than it would have been if I'd had a feeling preference, and probably also easier than if I was a man with a feeling preference. I mean, I haven't got the answer. It's a sort of question, Richard, in the sense of, what are your thoughts? Have you thought about the gender aspect of behavior as well, and how that's complicated?
It's a great question, Catherine. I've not thought about it at that depth, that level of depth. However, the gender piece has always come up because I've noticed that my mentoring clients are men. So when it's one-to-one, it's men and introverted. But when I have group sessions, workshops where they opt in, people have to choose to attend, it is majority female in presence, attendees. So, and when I say majority, I'm really meaning like 75, 3/4, of people attending are women. So that's not difficult to miss. And yeah, I've not sat with someone and really thought, gone and done some deep research. Maybe this is something you and I can talk about, but
Because more women have a feeling preference anyway, so it's quite likely that 70% of your attendees who are female, a lot of them will have the feeling preference. And I wonder whether that's the feeling preference sort of makes it more difficult for women or men to get on in particular environments, particularly the more sort of hard-nosed, fast-moving, manufacturing, engineering, high-tech type environments. Interesting.
Yeah, very.
They're very much needed in those environments, for sure. Marion.
Are you on mute, Marion?
You need to unmute, Marion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a cough and it's just terrible. But I think I read in the email with that I received in your bio and the work that you do, Richard, something about neurodiversity. Or maybe it's my imagination, but somehow I'm connecting it with your work, because so before the diversity and inclusion as a topic like exploded, I was thinking, like, what about the different ways our brain works while being an introvert, while being an extrovert, and it's not my hypothesis. It's research that I learned it in my MBTI certification program several years ago, that the corporate America has an ESTJ personality type, and so then that's the mold that everybody needs to fit in, because otherwise it's not working. And then so neurodiversity in terms of being aware of the difference between extroverts and introverts, and looking at that as a real divide, because they are just so far away from each other that there need to be conversations, like we are having conversations about this in workplaces, to bring it up to the consciousness of people, because there is a guessing game, right? As Sue was saying, like when an introvert is not saying anything, there are so many things that extroverts make up because the human brain is going to fill in the blanks. And many of the things that they are thinking is just totally off the charts and very far from the truth. So it's not a question, it's just a statement that I wanted to make, that it's like neurodiversity, introversion, extroversion. How can that be made part of that whole discourse? When we talk about how we are being different and what we can do to pay more attention to each other.
Yeah,
I certainly. Go ahead,
I was
Richard.
just saying that the neurodiversity topic is definitely one that's coming up a lot, and I say a lot. And I guess the last 6 to 8 months, any sessions I've done where there's a Q&A, it comes up at least once. So I was compelled to write an article on the Introvert Space LinkedIn page with a doctor who specializes in neurodivergence, and yeah, we did a joint piece on it to talk about where it overlaps and where it doesn't, and we released it on Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which was in the middle of March this year. I'm gonna pop the link into the chat as well, because it just very clearly just settles that conversation or the doubts, any doubts that people are, for sure.
I was thinking, Richard, of a type conference that I went to quite a while ago, and we were divided into groups and we were all talking about how we problem solve. And so I was in a group with a delightful INFP gentleman, and I was sort of explaining the way I make my decisions. And basically life works for ESTJs a bit like a whack-a-mole. The problem comes up, you've got your hammer and you hit it on the head, and then you go to the next problem and you've got a hammer and you hit it on the head, and then you go to the next one. That's kind of that's a little bit of the typical MO of an ESTJ, I'm afraid. And he was a lovely man, and he just sort of sat back and he just was like, and then he said to me something which I have never ever forgotten, and I use it whenever I feel I'm getting that pace on too much. And he said to me, maybe it isn't a problem to solve, Sue. Maybe it's a process in flow. And I thought, heck, I'd never quite sort of stopped to think of these, things that I had to do with the family or with the work or whatever. I'd never sort of sat back and thought of it as this beautiful process in flow. Which I clearly needed to do. I think most extroverts need rain. We may not have breaks, but we do have rains. So sometimes they need a bit of a tug. Does anybody have any other questions for Richard at this point?
I have a question. There was a really good question here from Catherine. Yeah, I would love to know why this topic hasn't attracted any extroverts. And I would like to ask for your ideas. Like, what could be the reason? I have my own ideas, but first I would like to have a sense of.
For me, I remember asking this question, or I was on a panel at an event talking about introvert or personality, and I noticed, again, there weren't many men in the audience, and then the chair in front of everyone said to me, "Well, how many men did you invite to the session?" And I said, "Wow, none." So she put me on the spot, and so there's that as well. Like, do we actually invite the people that we would like to be here? So I didn't send these to any known extroverts. That's my bad. I put it out there, and hope that it would attract the right people. But there are moments where we actually do need to reach out to specific individuals, specific groups, and say, hey, folks, this is happening. We really appreciate your input. I know you're not, you don't identify as introverted, etc., etc. However, that's not what this is about. So yeah, there's definitely that explicit invitation. I didn't do it, so I feel that's my bad.
No, I don't think you've done anything wrong, Richard.
No, I don't think so either.
I'm just trying to think how we advertised it. The text that we put on it was we certainly did have extroverts welcome here. But I agree with you. It's an interesting question. I think more normally we are maybe 50-50 with more extroverts along. I think, Elizabeth, you and I might be the only two extroverts here. Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think one of the things that it tells us as type professionals and practitioners is that we've still got a lot of work to do in this space. There's still so many people who either don't have the time or haven't had the space in their world to think this through. Maybe as AI approaches and we have got a little bit more time, then maybe it's our chance to slot in and just say, hey, with all this spare time you've got, let's take a look at diversity in this particular arena. But there is a lack of information or a lack of understanding and awareness in so many places. And, wherever you work, whether it's with families and parents or in businesses, this is, we know this to be truly incredible information. I was just wondering, Richard, if there's a question that you wish people asked you more often about your work.
Ooh, yeah.
Weirdly, people don't often ask me, what do you actually want from this?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Good question.
What's the end goal?
I'll put that to you.
Because
what's your end game, Richard?
Yeah, what's the end game? And I've often said it because I don't think there is an end game per se. What I would like, though, what would make me feel very happy is if personality, whatever you want to call it, personality training, personality diversity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, is included in onboarding training, especially at the big companies, because onboarding is required as HR and so forth states it for when individuals join organizations, and they cover a lot, if not all, of the protective characteristics as they should, disability, age, and blah blah blah. But the one thing that, unless a scientist tells me otherwise, we all have is just not present in said training. And so yeah, if I could change anything, I would change that, and then have line managers have that type of training as well to understand personality type, and it would just make such a difference to morale, to output. I mean, for those who are at the top, even the bottom line will change. It's important for everyone to see the benefits of personality training, for sure.
Yeah, you're speaking our language. for sure. Mary, just one last thing from you, and then we'll end.
Yeah, so just a quick note similar to the question why. There have been tons of books about introversion out there in the last 10 years, whatever. Susan Cain started the whole movement, and so that's a great thing for introverts to read and get confirmation and verification. Yeah, they are not broken. But just like the communication classes are for introverts, extroverts don't think about picking up a book and reading about it, because somehow it's not on their radar, and how can we bring that onto their radar? That's the question.
So I actually created a toolkit for the inclusive management of introverts. It's called Timmy for short. And I take that everywhere I go, all my workshops, and when I complete it and I have, managers nodding their heads and saying, oh my gosh, that's really good, a bit of that. I was like, well, yeah, it's great because it all comes from, and this just happens to be here because I had a session today, but God, the blur wasn't on, you'd be able to see it. But this is it. This is the toolkit for the inclusive management of introverts. And I could share a link for that in the chat because, yeah, it shouldn't just be us. To your point, Marion, we need to change the environment. The environment needs to change so that we can feel comfortable and psychologically safe to be ourselves without having to change who we are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Amen to that, as they say. But thank you so much, Richard. I've really gained a lot from listening to you, and I'm sure that you'll be around for a while and we can learn a lot more from you. So thank you so much for your time and just spending it with us and helping us here, but also everybody else who you're working with and who whose world you're contributing to. I think it's fabulous what you're doing. So please keep going with that. We've also got some other things coming up, and seeing as we're talking about diversity, something that isn't even on our website yet, but is going to be up very shortly. Josh, I hope you're there somewhere. You might want to add a little bit more to this, but on the 15th of July, we have got the ADHD survival kit that Josh is going to be doing. So looking at the intersection of type and ADHD. So if that's something that interests you, I think these days we all know somebody who's either mid-diagnosis, had been diagnosed, recently diagnosed, thought they have been, and then find out that that it's something that's important in their world. So Josh, did you want to say anything about that? I don't like to put you on the spot, but we're really looking forward to that session as well.
That's okay. I am on the spot, but yeah, do come along. It'll be a mixture of practical, informative insights, and I think you could read it also as what happens when like an INFP finally gets to grips with TE and SI, or just sensing and thinking in general. So I think there's a lot of people who would find it interesting or benefit from it. And also I'll throw some type insights in as well.
Great, lovely. So that's coming up on the 15th of July. And then after that, if there's anybody here that doesn't know about the Oxford conference, please take a look at our website. We would absolutely love you to join us there. I think there are people here who are definitely coming. Catherine, you're our keynote speaker that's kicking it off. So thank you for doing that. We're looking forward to a really sensational conference. So please do join us if you can. And we will at this point love you and leave you and let you get on with your whatever might be left of the evening. But thank you so much, everybody, and particularly once again to Richard. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Richard.
having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.